The storm has arrived as a group of black people were brutally attacked in a poor neighborhood. The media seemed absent, no one spoke up to defend them, and the pain of this community was cast in shadows. Police cars drove by, but they only stopped for a few minutes and left, as if they had no special duty to fulfill. The victims were left behind, caught in the silence of the system. As everything sank into the darkness of injustice, a shocking statement rang out from the White House. A surprising declaration from President Donald Trump, someone no one expected to take such a step. He stood there, with a map of the United States in the background, a bright light shining on his sharp face, staring directly into the camera, as if he were speaking directly to the nation. We cannot allow racism to continue. I will protect every citizen, no matter who they are. Today, I will carry out a revolution to protect the black community. Each word he spoke struck like waves crashing against rocks, determined, yet filled with deep surprise. People couldn't believe their eyes. How could this be? How could someone like him, President Trump, declare his intention to protect the black community when he had previously caused so much controversy on this issue? Although the true purpose wasn't fully understood, this captured everyone's attention. A group of black people from a nearby city, who had been attacked by racists, immediately organized a protest demanding justice. But in the darkness, as the protest was about to turn chaotic, Trump appeared. Not with a large security team, not with empty promises. Trump appeared with a small group of security personnel. "This is not a time for politics," Trump said, looking at the protesters. "This is the time to act." With an unimaginable level of surprise and decisiveness, he put forward a plan to protect the area. Both the black community and their supporters stood in shock. It wasn't the attackers who would face the police or the military. It would be the president himself standing up against the troublemakers. While the protest continued, the security force deployed by Trump was not a powerful army. They were strangers, people no one would think of when it came to protecting the citizens. But they shared one thing in common: determination and loyalty to the goal Trump had set. In the following days, the black community in this neighborhood began to feel the change. The groups of wrongdoers had retreated, no longer daring to continue their violent acts. However, within those who stood up against racism, one big question remained: was Trump truly doing the right thing? Or was it just a political stunt? In the first nights after Trump's announcement, the atmosphere in the neighborhood became tense. While his protective actions had reduced some of the risk, the doubt still lingered. The black people still couldn't believe that a president like Trump, who had made controversial statements and policies, could be the one to protect their rights. Trump sat in his office, looking out the window, reflecting on his decision. This is not just a strategy. This is a necessity. If I don't act, then who will? The question challenged him internally. The entire nation was watching him, and a battle whose outcome was unknown was about to unfold. Was it a sincere action, or a sophisticated tactic to consolidate power? Only time would tell. The next day, the atmosphere in the neighborhood remained tense. While the black community began to feel the protection, a group of local young people, who were skeptical of President Trump's intervention, began sending people to monitor the movements of the security force. They wanted to ensure that this was not a political trap, but truly an opportunity for them to live in peace without discrimination. One afternoon, as the sunset illuminated the dusty streets, Trump received a call from one of his close advisors, Alex Rivers, the head of the Neighborhood Protection Campaign. Alex was a former Special Forces soldier who had fought in many hot spots around the world. He knew how to handle tense situations, but this time, the complexity of the issue surpassed anything he had faced before. "Sir, we've made some progress, but the skepticism is still overwhelming. Many people still don't trust us. They think this is just a political move," Alex reported, his voice betraying some concern. Trump frowned and nodded. "Don't worry, Alex. We're just getting started. If they don't believe, we'll make them believe. I'll go to that neighborhood this weekend. Don't let anyone stop me." Meanwhile, one of the key figures in the neighborhood, Carla Williams, a black community leader, stood among the crowd, staring intently at her phone screen with a tense expression. Carla was the first to sense the change, but she was also the first to doubt the president's motives. She had fought for her community's rights for decades, and political promises had always ended in disappointment. One afternoon, as Carla was holding a meeting with the community leadership team, she received a surprising call from Trump. "Carla, I want to meet you. Trust me, I will do what's right. We'll build a better future for your community." Trump's voice was warm, but resolute. Carla couldn't help but feel a bit anxious, but she also realized that, this time, the president might be doing something truly different. Okay, I'll meet you, she replied, her tone assertive, but her heart full of questions. When Trump and Carla met, the atmosphere was so tense it could be cut with a knife. Carla looked him straight in the eye, her gaze filled not only with suspicion but also with challenge. You can protect us, but you have to show us that you truly care. No more empty promises. Trump looked at her, unwavering. I'm not doing this for politics, Carla. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. If I don't protect this community, who will? They both stared at each other, silent for a moment. Carla finally nodded, although many questions remained unanswered in her heart. If you really do this, I will stand by you. But don't let us down. From then on, the cooperation between Trump and Carla, as well as between the president and the community, slowly began to form. But every step they took had to face unforeseen challenges. Would this trust hold strong as the fight continued to intensify, or would it just be a shattered dream? The scene in the neighborhood had changed, but the tension never fully disappeared. The lives of the Black community had returned, at least on the surface, but the emotional scars were still there. The patrols from Trump's security force became an essential part of their daily life. Despite the protection, trust had not yet been fully established. In the White House office, President Trump stood before his desk, staring at the map of the areas where the attacks and protests had occurred. The light from the desk lamp illuminated his face, highlighting the wrinkles on his forehead. He had made some progress, but a bigger problem awaited him ahead. He was not only protecting a neighborhood or a community, he was facing an organized crime network trying to exploit racial discrimination as a tool to further their political agenda. We need to find out who is behind these organizations, Alex. They don't just want racial discrimination, they're manipulating national politics as well. If we don't act now, the consequences will be severe, Trump said, his eyes fixed on the map. Alex Rivers, the head of the Neighborhood Protection Campaign and a former Special Forces soldier, nodded in agreement. I've started gathering information, but progress has been slow. The leads are vague and hard to track down. He paused for a moment before continuing. We've also discovered that there may be an international crime syndicate behind this. These people are not just causing chaos domestically, they're involved in supplying weapons and funding the riots. Trump said firmly, then we need a secret investigation team. I don't want to just push back the riots. I want to eliminate these people at the root. In an emergency meeting at the White House, Trump ordered the formation of a task force made up of experts from various fields: police, military, intelligence analysts, and security personnel. Their goal was to investigate and neutralize the organizations attempting to manipulate the community and politics. The next day, the task force began investigating the links between those behind the attacks and international organizations involved in racial discrimination. One of the key investigations led the team to a mysterious figure named Marcus Devereaux, a financial mogul believed to have funded numerous racial riots over the years. Carla Williams, the Black community leader, had by now fully become part of Trump's campaign. Although trust with him was still an issue, she had seen a change in the president's actions and strategy. She decided to participate in the investigation, not just out of duty, but also due to her concern for the future of her community. One evening, Carla and Alex met at a quiet cafe near the neighborhood. She carefully looked around before speaking. We're investigating these organizations, but is anyone else outside of us aware of what's going on? Is there anyone in the government trying to sabotage Trump's campaign? Carla asked, her voice clearly filled with anxiety. Alex looked at her and nodded. It's possible. This network is very complex, and it involves powerful people. But we have to continue, because if we don't, we'll never have a chance to change things. Carla frowned, speaking decisively. We won't give up. My community has suffered enough. We must protect them at all costs. On a sleepless night, the task force uncovered an important lead. A large weapons deal was about to take place at a warehouse in a remote area where the racial discrimination groups had previously carried out attacks. This information made everyone feel like they were at a critical turning point in the fight against injustice. Trump received this report in his office. Good. Tonight, we act. There's no room for hesitation anymore, he said, his voice determined, as if this resolve had been building inside him for a long time. The attack was meticulously planned, and that night, Trump's task force entered the warehouse area. Behind the towering walls, they prepared to face some of the most dangerous criminals they had ever encountered. The night had fallen, and the dim lights reflected off the empty streets, where the fear still lingered in the air. The Black community, although protected, still felt the constant sense of being controlled. Every step of the security forces was watched, and within each person, doubt remained. Carla Williams was not an easy person to trust. She had fought for years to seek justice for her community, and this time, she could not overlook any details. Carla stood by the window of her small apartment, looking outside. The patrol cars slowly passed by. Everything seemed calm, but she knew how fragile that peace was. Not everything can be solved with protection, Trump, she murmured to herself. She needed to understand more about what was happening. She had to find out who the real people behind this were. At the same time, Alex Rivers, after a long night of investigation, returned with new information. He knocked on Carla's door early in the morning, just as the sunlight began to pour through the high-rise buildings. "Carla, I've got news. We're not just dealing with a criminal organization, but a group with deep influence in politics," Alex said as he stepped into the room. Carla turned away from the window, her eyes fixed on him. "Who are they? What names? Who are you talking about?" Alex placed the briefcase down on the table and opened a series of reports and photos. "We've just discovered a few people closely tied to Marcus Devereux, the leader of the international crime syndicate. These names aren't random, Carla. They're people capable of manipulating elections and funding extremist groups." He pointed to a photo of a man at a lavish party. "This is Charles Miller, a major political donor, who has been behind several election campaigns." Carla stared at the photo of Miller. "So they don't just want chaos in the community, they want to control national politics. What's their goal?" "Crisis," Alex replied, his voice lowering. "They want to create a cultural war to easily control the social classes. If the black and white communities can't live together in peace, if they continue to exploit racial discrimination, they'll plunge the whole country into a state of crisis, and from there, they can easily manipulate politics." Carla looked at the report, her heart tightening. "So this battle isn't just about protecting my community. It's about protecting the country from a deeper conspiracy." Alex nodded. "Exactly. And we can't do this alone. We need support from people within the government. And if we don't act quickly, this war will go further than we can control." Meanwhile, in the White House, Trump had received the report from Alex. He stood before his desk, looking at the files and images gathered by the team. The warm yellow light from the desk lamp cast long shadows on the walls. Trump wasn't easily defeated by challenges, but this time, what he was facing was immense. A dirty campaign that even people in his administration could be involved in. "We can't let these people win," Trump said, tapping his finger lightly on the desk. "Start now. We can't let them continue to secretly manipulate national politics." He turned to Alex over the phone. "Everyone get ready for tonight. We won't let them escape the truth." Outside, a cold wind swept through the streets. The patrol cars passed again, but this time, it wasn't just about protection anymore. A covert war was being prepared, and both Trump, Carla, and Alex knew that if they didn't act quickly, the truth would be buried, and a much greater threat would become a reality. The next day, the atmosphere in the neighborhood grew more tense than ever. The black community continued to live under the protection of the special forces, but the curious and skeptical eyes could not hide the mistrust in President Trump's actions. Carla Williams continued to feel like she was standing at a crossroads. On one side, the belief in real reform, and on the other, the anxiety about a clever political move. Meetings with other communities became increasingly tense as questions began to arise. Does Trump truly have good intentions? Carla had no choice but to continue cooperating, at least until the truth became clearer. But deep down, her doubts remained. In a closed room, Alex Rivers stood before Carla, along with several other figures from the black community, people who had been fighting for years. Each of them carried a history of pain and hope. They were those who had fought against racial discrimination, those who had relentlessly sought justice. But now, they had to face a big question. Is President Trump truly an ally, or just someone exploiting the community's pain? Alex looked at the group of people seated before him, a tense expression on his face. What do we do next? Whether we like it or not, we have to trust what Trump is doing. But I also understand that not all of you trust him. Carla sat in silence for a moment, her eyes distant. She didn't know where to begin. If we don't cooperate, will he really be able to change anything? Will fighting against him make things worse? She asked, her voice full of concern. One of the community leaders, Gregory, spoke up. Cooperation with those in power is not always a sacrifice, but we must make sure our goals are not overshadowed. We need to maintain independence in our thinking and actions. We can't just stand still, we must act. But we need a strategy, Alex said. We can't do this alone. We need support from people within the government, from those who have the power to change the situation. This is not just about fighting racism. This is a battle for power. The conversation continued, with each person expressing their opinion. Carla realized that cooperating with Trump could yield results. But there had to be a condition. Is there anyone in the government who genuinely wants to help the Black community, or are they just using the situation to solidify power? At that moment, a call came in from the White House. It was Trump. Carla, I need to meet with you and your team right now. His voice was deep and decisive. We need to move forward together. There's no more time to hesitate. Carla sighed, turning to the people in the room. We'll go meet him, but we'll hold our ground. The group stood up and headed outside. They knew that this meeting would decide everything. But what worried them wasn't the meeting with Trump, but whether they could hold their ground under the pressure from the government as the political battle grew more complicated. At the White House, everything was ready. Trump sat at his desk, his hands skimming through documents, but his gaze was fixed on the door. When Carla and her team walked in, he stood up, his eyes bright. Thank you for coming, Trump said, his voice carrying a seriousness that didn't lack urgency. Carla looked at him seriously, with no greeting in her eyes. Can you tell us more clearly what you really want to do? Trump didn't respond immediately. He sat down, his eyes still fixed on Carla. I understand your skepticism, but I don't have time for long explanations. Look at what we've already done. Your community is starting to see change. But if we don't act now, things will get worse. Alex stepped forward, his voice firm. We don't just need promises. We need real action, and we need to know that you're not doing this for personal gain. Trump looked at Alex, a smile on his face. It's not me who needs promises from you. I need action. Show me that you want change, and I will stand with you. The tension in the room escalated. Could they trust Trump, or was this just a power play in his political game? Carla didn't have an immediate answer, but inside her, something had begun to shift. Perhaps, only through action and cooperation could this community achieve real change. The next day, the tension reached its peak. The investigation had led Trump's Special Forces team to a weapons depot on the outskirts of the city, where rumors suggested a major arms deal would take place that night. International criminals, along with forces supporting racial discrimination, seemed to be preparing for a large-scale attack, not only to maintain power, but also to incite riots and divide American society. The goal wasn't just a crisis within the Black community, but a full-scale political war. At the White House, Trump stood before the large screen, monitoring the final movements of his forces. Documents about criminals, secret donors, and their dark plans had been gathered. But this time, it wasn't just his special forces. Carla Williams and the Black community leaders were also involved in this strategy. They were no longer outsiders, but an integral part of the protective policy Trump was pushing. Carla stood beside Trump in the operations room, looking at the maps and information on the screen. She was no longer just a bystander. She was a key part of the upcoming assault. We need to act now, Mr. Trump. If we don't leave immediately, they'll be gone before we get there, she said, her voice resolute but still filled with worry. Trump nodded, his gaze fixed on the screen. I understand. Our team must move quickly and precisely. There's no room for mistakes. Suddenly, one of the Special Forces officers entered the room, holding an urgent report. Mr. President, we've just received new information. The weapons depot isn't just a place for ammunition. They're preparing a document storage facility, confidential documents related to their plans. If we get our hands on them, it will be a major blow to this group. Trump looked at the report and then turned to Carla. Carla, we need you to lead the team to retrieve those documents. We'll support from a distance. Carla didn't hesitate. Though many questions still lingered in her mind, she knew it was time to step up. I'll go, but I need a strong team. A Special Forces team, led by Carla, was dispatched immediately. The team consisted of seasoned fighters, trained to handle the most tense situations. They were ready. Meanwhile, Trump remained in the operations room, closely monitoring each step of the team via the screens. The operation took place in the dead of night, as the Special Forces members moved silently like shadows. They advanced towards the weapons depot, where the dim lights and cold, quiet air created an eerie atmosphere. Carla led the way, her gun in hand, her eyes sharp like a hawk tracking its prey. The team slowly approached the depot's door. One of them, Michael, discovered a small tunnel behind the building, which seemed like the safest way in without drawing attention. Carla signaled for the team to stop. "We'll go in through here. Make sure there's no noise." "Michael, lead the way." They moved quietly through the abandoned land, avoiding the dim light, and found a way into the weapons storage. However, just as they entered, an odd sound echoed. The depot door suddenly slammed shut, as though someone had detected their presence. Michael signaled for everyone to stay still, but Carla quickly gave an order. "We can't stop. Move forward." They rushed inside, facing the guards who were stationed there. Guns were raised, and a fierce gunfight erupted. In that moment, Carla felt time stand still. She had to keep her composure, not just for victory, but for the future of her community. "Fire!" Carla shouted, and everyone in the team immediately followed. They quickly incapacitated the guards, clearing the path into the depot. Now, their main objective was clear: retrieve the crucial documents the criminal group was holding. They only had one chance to get them. They entered the room containing the documents. The files were tightly secured, but nothing could stop the determination of the special forces. Carla opened the safe, and the documents were revealed before their eyes. They contained critical evidence of the illegal activities and plans the criminal group was executing. Once the documents were secured, the team quickly retreated. However, on their way out, they were ambushed. A fierce battle continued, but with the support of Trump's forces and Carla leading the way, they eventually made it out safely. Upon returning to the White House, Carla placed the documents on the table. The light from the meeting room's lamps reflected off the papers, filled with text. Trump stood up and looked at the critical documents. "This is the turning point, Carla. We've got the proof." Carla looked at him, letting out a sigh. "We can win, but only if we don't give up. Only if we keep believing in ourselves." In the White House meeting room, the tension hadn't eased after Carla and the Special Forces team returned with the crucial documents. Trump and his advisors stood around the table, their anxious and tense gazes fixed on the papers spread out before them. Carla stood off to the side, her expression cold but betraying an undeniable exhaustion. She had just fought a battle not only with the enemy outside, but also with her own doubts. "These documents are not just evidence of crime," Trump said, his voice resonating deeply. "They reveal a larger plan, a calculated strategy to sow chaos and manipulate the entire political foundation of this country." Alex Rivers, standing next to Trump, scanned the documents thoroughly. "This isn't just our fight anymore. This is a fight against the manipulation of those with dark power, those who are trying to destroy the stability of the country," he spoke, pausing for a moment, his sharp gaze sweeping over each person in the room. "What's our next move?" Trump didn't rush to answer. He was carefully considering every option, every decision that lay ahead. His fingers lightly tapped on the table, his face etched with thought. "We're up against a powerful enemy. They are not just criminals. They are behind influential political figures. If we don't act now, the consequences will be dire." Carla stepped forward, locking eyes with Trump. "I agree, but what's crucial is that we have the support of the community. Without the cooperation of the people, we will just be a government group trying to take on a force that's too large." Trump turned toward Carla, his regard for her now different. She was no longer just a community leader fighting for the rights of Black people. She had become a vital part of his strategy. "Carla, you're right. But we need to show the people that this isn't just a political war. This is a war for justice and equality." One of Trump's advisors, Lisa, stepped forward and handed over a detailed report. "We've uncovered some of the people behind last night's weapons deal. They are individuals capable of manipulating elections and policies, people who aren't just involved in the riots, but are also planning a large-scale cultural war. We need to go after these figures head-on." Trump examined the report, his eyes lighting up as if he had made a decision. "We won't just go after these organizations. We'll dismantle their entire network, from the donors to those pulling the strings behind the scenes. If we can bring these big names into the light, we'll win this." Carla stared at Trump, still struggling to believe it. "So what's our next move?" "We have the evidence, but dealing with these people won't be easy." Trump turned back to her, his eyes full of resolve. We'll make all the information public. But not just that. We'll create a wave of public opinion to force those involved to face the consequences. We'll show the whole country that we will never forgive those who seek to destroy justice. Meanwhile, a group of other staff members in Trump's team, including media and social strategy experts, began drafting a propaganda plan. A campaign would be launched, not only to expose the criminals, but also to increase political and social pressure on those who supported racial discrimination and violence. "Don't let any of us be afraid," Trump said, his voice full of confidence. "We have the evidence, we have the power, and most importantly, we have the people behind us. Together, we will bring justice back." Carla sensed something different in Trump's words. It wasn't calculated, but an undeniable determination. She looked around the room, seeing people nodding in agreement. Though they didn't fully agree with everything Trump said, they knew that if they didn't act now, they would never get another chance. Things were gradually changing. This wasn't just a government fight. It was a fight for justice, for the community. And in this battle, no matter how difficult it might be, they would fight for a better future. When the campaign to expose the criminal organizations and their supporters of racial discrimination was made public, the entire nation erupted. The documents that Carla and the special forces had retrieved from the weapons depot not only provided evidence of weapons deals, but also irrefutable proof of the involvement of influential political figures. Major criminals, the ones behind the riots, were finally brought to light. The political battle grew intense. Those involved in the government began to push back, attempting to conceal the truth. However, the strong wave of opposition from the community, from the people, especially the Black communities, rendered every attempt to cover up the truth futile. Peaceful protests erupted across the country, demanding justice not just for the victims, but as a call for real fairness and equality. Trump stood before a crowd at a press conference, with images and documents about the supporters of racist organizations projected behind him. This time, he was no longer the one seeking power or personal gain. He stood there as a true leader, his face no longer stern, but softer, a hint of something more compassionate. "Today, we are not just defeating criminals. We are defeating injustice, and we are defeating a culture that has long been manipulated by discrimination." Carla stood beside Trump, gazing at the crowd. Her doubts had vanished. She had fought too long, felt the pain of her community, and now she could see the changes clearly. The persistent struggles of hers and her allies had finally brought a glimmer of hope to the Black community. In a subsequent meeting, as the results of the campaign began to be recognized, even Trump's officials could not deny the success of this battle. However, what surprised everyone was Trump's decision not to take all the credit for himself. He didn't want to be the sole hero of the story. "Justice doesn't come from one person," he said in an internal meeting. "Justice is the result of cooperation between communities, between those who have stood up for a common cause." Carla felt a shift within herself. She remembered the times she had stood before other Black groups, when doubt about Trump had still been a large wall between them. But now, that had changed. She knew that while things were still not perfect, at least they had been able to create real changes, not through words, but through action. A week later, during the midterm elections, the results were not surprising. Candidates and politicians who supported equality, opposed racial discrimination, and promoted social change garnered the majority of votes. A new wave of change began to form, and the Black community, under the leadership of people like Carla, became an undeniable force in American politics. Carla stood at a peaceful protest on the weekend, holding a sign that read "Justice for All." She saw other citizens, those who had struggled together through the years. In the evening sunlight, she realized that their fight had never ended, but they had taken a significant step forward. And in the eyes of those standing beside her, she saw determination, unity, and belief in a better future. At the White House, Trump looked out of his office window, where the setting sun cast its light. Things were not perfect, but at least he had done something significant. He knew that no one could change everything in one night, but change begins with decisive actions. And sometimes, even a small action can create a lasting impact on an entire nation.